Tokyo, Adachi Ward. As the poorest and most chaotic district in Tokyo, the only advantage of Adachi district is that rent, land prices, and prices are cheap. In an ordinary rental house. Fire escape flame bomb. Qin Kong opened his mouth sharply, spewing out a fiery flame, a raging fire. The blazing flames were rolling in the air. Fortunately, there were no flammables on the walls of the room, otherwise a fire was inevitable. The flame bullet that was released was startled. Qin Kong immediately controlled chakra and stopped the ninjutsu. Even the most basic ninjutsu consumes a lot of his chakra, and his brain is a little dazed because of the decrease in chakra. After releasing the ninja surgery, Qin Kong felt a sense of weakness inside his body. He held on to the bed for a long time before he regained his senses. On his weak and pale face, Qin Kong showed a happy smile. He didn't expect that his mobile phone would explode suddenly when he was playing the mobile game Naruto, and he didn't expect to bring the ninjutsu system of Naruto with him after crossing the road. This should be a blessing in disguise, but if he played at that time with iClub's game Crossing. This is a different world from the previous life. China is still China, and island countries are still island countries. Although there is no difference between the two worlds in terms of history, economy, and politics, they are quite different in terms of specific art and cultural products. Although island countries are in act culture, it still dominates, but there is no Naruto, no One Piece, and other works that Qin Kong has never heard of, such as The Mountain Thief, The Farmer, and The Great Thief Doer. Suddenly, Qin Kong's wrist felt like waves of pain. After being weakened, his soul was finally perfectly integrated with his body, and the pain and memory that remained before his death poured in. Pain. The pain in the wrist as if it had been removed. The last memory of the original owner before he died poured into his mind. The original owner of this body committed suicide by cutting his wrists. The blood on the dilapidated desk has dried up, black and red, like frozen blood. Although the scars on the wrists have been scarred, the pain still remains. People will not die immediately after cutting their wrists, but they will be helplessly weak and watch their lives peeled away a little bit. What kind of despair it will be. Qin Kong gritted his teeth on the bed and persisted, and the pain finally disappeared after a long time. Since he was possessed after death, rather than seized during his lifetime, Qin Kong's heart felt a lot more comfortable. If he took the house before his death, he would have a feeling of murder. The original owner of the body is called Mizuno Sora. He rented a small 20 square meter rental house with an independent bathroom. The kitchen and bedrooms were placed together without a balcony. The various facilities are aging, but this is already the most luxurious rental house that Mizuno Sora can rent. The original owner, Sora Mizuno, was an ordinary high school student. In addition to his handsome appearance, he could be described as dull. His father was fired from the company due to a major mistake in working together. In the corporate culture of the island country, when people are fired from the company in middle age, they announce that they have been thrown into the abyss. In the closed circle, no one is the same. Companies in the industry dare to recruit the fired employee, and companies in other industries have to consider whether his age is worth rehiring. After losing his job, Sora Mizuno's father was disdainful of doing odd jobs, drinking heavily all day long, punching and kicking his mother and him. Finally, the mother couldn't bear this day-to-day violence and left the father and son with Sora Mizuno on top after high school. After repeated ideological struggles, I simply rented a rental house outside the school with the money from my part-time job, and paid the monthly rent with the money from my part-time job. And the reason for the death of this high school student is also very simple: school bullying. The timid personality and the cowardly character influenced by the family made Sora Mizuno the target of bullying in the school. Being blackmailed, running errands, and even serving as a human flesh bag was commonplace. Under the collection of various negative emotions, he chose to die. Such incidents of death due to school bullying may not even make news headlines in some cases. Maybe they will be laughed at after death. The deceased's resistance to pressure is too poor, and it will be a scum in society in the future. school bullying, domestic violence. Looking at the scarred knife wound on his hand, Qin Kong's eyes slowly darkened. He was not an honest person who would swallow his voice after being bullied, or he would not have been openly exposed to the harassment behavior of his immediate boss in his previous life. They fought together and were finally fired from the company. Qin Kong clasped the mirror with his fingers and looked at himself in the mirror. He was only about 1.73 meters tall. He was not tall, but his appearance was quite good. Erden, but with a cowardly look on his face, and a small figure. He looked at the boy in the mirror, and clasped the mirror with his fingers. Rest in peace, if you resurrect me, then I will collect the debt for you. Qin Kong, or Mizuno Kong said in a deep voice. After saying these words, Qin Kong's body became lighter in an instant, and the scar on his wrist also became lighter. Qin Kong thinks it's nothing, he is like a tenant of this body, paying rent is a matter of course, as a thank you for my rebirth, I will take back your past sufferings for you one by one. A string of numbers jumped up and down in the eyeball. Fire escape, LV1 Genkan LV1 Medical Ninjutsu, LV1 This is his biggest reliance, the Naruto system brought from the original world. The 3 Naruto skills are the most basic parts, but for ordinary people, no matter whether they breathe flames, heal wounds, or knock down trees with one punch, they can all be classified as gods. The next day, before dawn, Qin Kong bounced off the bed and sat up. This unnamed system is not a lazy system for mouth-to-mouth feeding. These 3 basic skills require daily practice to improve. It was the first time that the fire bomb was released in the room and the house was almost set on fire. Qin Kong did not dare to practice fire escape at home. Even the most basic fire escape was too dangerous in an easily flammable room. 0. I saw him standing in a small room, stretching his hands and feet and starting to practice Gang Chuan. Unlike Soft Chuan, which focuses on defense and attack, Gang Chuan has only one word, just. There was a sound of fists piercing the air and sweat dripping on the floor in the small room, and even the air seemed to be hot due to the movement of this body. This small rental house in Adachi Ward is less than 20 square meters. It has a separate bathroom. The kitchen and bedrooms are placed together, and there is no balcony. Over the years, all kinds of facilities have been aging, the sound insulation effect is extremely poor, and the stairs upstairs are still missing 2 or 3 steps, but this is the most luxurious rental house he can rent. The original owner's body is like a rookie. His weak body aggravates his lack of self-confidence. When he is bullied, he doesn't even have the courage to fight back. Gang Chuan practice can not only enhance his fighting ability, but also greatly shape his body. The benefits can make the body less weak in a short period of time. Just practicing Gang Chuan is a torture for the body. After practicing for less than half an hour, the muscles all over the body began to sore, and the large beads of sweat flowed from the forehead to the chin to the neck, and every muscle on the body the soreness was trembling, but the more it became unbearable, the more Qin Kong gritted his teeth. The zealous attacking Gang Chuan also brought a huge burden to the body. The Gang Chuan LV1 presented by the system allowed Qin Kong to complete every movement of the training in a prudent manner, but the burden on the body would not be reduced. No one can succeed casually, even though Qin Kong has systematic help, but relying on this weak chicken's body to give him a set of the most powerful physical skills, the body can't withstand the explosion before it is released. Died. Qin Kong gritted his teeth, endured the tearing sensation of his body and punched his fists again and again. Not only his spirit persisted, but also the persistence of the original owner of this body. Yu reading www.yuuganshu.com. He wants revenge, he wants to take revenge on those who have insulted him. At dawn, Qin Kong washed himself in the bathroom like a dead dog, and then lay motionless on the ground. His body was still swollen. Qin Kong used his strong perseverance to release medical ninjutsu to relieve his physical fatigue. Gang Chuan trains his body, medical ninjutsu treats soreness and at the same time increases his proficiency in ninjutsu. He serves multiple purposes with one stone. The only ones who are tired are spirit and chakra. After the strenuous exercise, Qin Kong's appetite greatly increased, and he ate all the stock in the house. Everyone who practices Gang Chuan is a big eater. Just by spending like this, the money from the part-time job may not be enough for me to eat. Put on the school uniform and rubbed his half-full stomach. Adachi Ward is a suburb of Tokyo, and the traffic is not very convenient, but Qin Kong did not plan to ride a bicycle, but ran to school by himself. As the poorest and most chaotic district in Tokyo, Adachi Ward not only has low income and poor public security, but there was once a social survey. The number of votes tops the list after all. This is a historical town with a legacy of poverty and chaos since the Edo period. Not only is the public security and economy poor, but the education level of Adachi Ward is also the lowest in the whole country. It is even the lowest in the whole country. The primary school grades in Adachi Ward reached the national average only last year, while the level of middle school students is far below the national average. It can be said that in addition to low rent and cheap land prices, living in Adachi Ward is not as good as living in Chiba Prefecture to the east, and Chiba Prefecture residents really look down on Adachi Ward. Thinking of the various rumors in Adachi district, Qin Kong used a small amount of chakra to gather on his legs and feet, and Qin Kong opened his legs to run. Running to school was also a way of training. After taking a deep breath, Qin Kong slowed down as he approached the school gate. Although the school's teaching quality was not good, the student union was still very lively. There were members of the student union on both sides of the school gate on duty every day. After coming to the classroom, Qin Kong found that the atmosphere was a little weird. The classmates in the classroom seemed to be looking at him vaguely, and they all turned their heads to communicate something. The original owner has experienced this kind of ridicule from the crowd many times. Every time this collective smile appears, it means that something unfortunate will happen. Bullying Mizuno Sora is a reserved program of Class B for 1 year. As a person with strong psychological qualities, Qin Kong just frowned, and then returned to his position without anyone else. Campus bullying is not the evil of a few people, but a group of people watching. The best way to deal with the group of abusers is to ignore them. The soldiers will block the water and cover it up. No matter how arrogant the other party is, it is the most stupid to turn around and run away at this time. Method of confrontation. He found a vase on his table with white flowers in it. Not only him, but also a submissive girl at the table next to her. In Japan, there is a small white vase on the table, which means to pay homage to the dead. I don't know which era was used for school bullying, and it quickly swept the whole country. This is a very common method. In addition to this, there are also portraits with similar effects, and small flowers are placed around them. This kind of bullying will be suffered by the original owner several times a month on average. But it's common, but it doesn't mean Qin Kong wants to accept it, just like it's always been so doesn't mean it's correct. Seeing Sora Mizuno's stunned performance, the onlookers in the classroom laughed heartily. In a pond of mockery like frogs, he stretched out 2 hands and grabbed 2 vases respectively. Mizuno. Mizuno-san. The girl next door, who lowered her head, raised her head slightly and looked at Sora Mizuno with cowardly eyes. Qin Kong looked at the girl at the next table. What's wrong, classmate Kaibi? Heibu sa, the bullied target in the same class as Qin Kong, may be pitiful companions in each other's eyes, but in the eyes of the class, they are a pair of living treasures. Unlike Qin Kong, who was born in Kanto, Keibusha was transferred from Kyushu Island, and a strange accent naturally became the object of ridicule for those who cared. In addition, he always bowed his head and covered his eyebrows with thick bangs. It seemed more cowardly. This is. Saibi Kawai did not know what to say. Isn't it a commonplace thing to have white flowers on the table? Why did Mizuno-san react differently this time? It was put there by someone else, right? Mizuno Sora knew what Kabe Saya wanted to say. Everyone has always done this. It's better to accept it silently. But if you are bullied, you can endure it for a while. If you resist, you will be bullied even more tragically. All the people who are bullied have such an idea. Endure the calm for a while, why can't you bear it? Take a step back and see the sky, why should I retreat? The reality is only to endure for a while to gain an inch, and take a step back to make it worse. In Kaibi's wide eyes, a scene she never imagined happened. Mizuno. On the windowsill with his back to the sun, Mizuno Sora held up two vases. The sunlight shone through the gaps, forming beams of light. He held up the vases just like that. He raised his arms and threw the vase heavily towards the wall behind the classroom. Boom! The glass vase hit the wall with a crisp cracking sound, and it shattered to the ground, like the silent air in the classroom. Everyone looked at Qin Kong like a ghost, unable to believe that what happened just now was done by this coward. Does he not want to live? Hey! Mizuno! Do you want to die? Bastard, that's the gift we bought you. Oh shit! For the entire 2 years, Class B exploded, and there was a mix of insults and conversations. In a public school in a chaotic area, most of the people were walking corpses waiting to die. They know that they don't have the ability to go to college, and they also know that they can't afford the cost of going to college, so they put their extra energy on love, bullying and other things that seem more interesting. In front of Haibusha, Qin Kong looked at those who had bullied him with fiery eyes. He was like a mountain, and Haibusha was hidden under the shadow of the mountain. The original owner's residual consciousness was happy, and Qin Kong's muscles tightened just as happy. Kabusaya's body trembled in fear, and her body almost shrunk into the table. She saw the group of people coming over eagerly. Just as Kabuki closed her eyes in despair, the classroom door was pulled open. What's the noise? Morning meeting. The teacher in charge walked into the classroom with the lesson plan in between, and knocked heavily on the classroom door. A teacher is equivalent to a class teacher. Although there are many scumbags in this public high school, they have not yet reached the level of openly beating teachers. Seeing that the teacher in charge was coming, the gathered students returned to their positions cursing. Someone else picked up a pen and wiped Qin Kong's neck, making no secret of the threat. Qin Kong replied with a middle finger, and the angry opponent couldn't help but fight in front of the teacher. The teacher in charge just glanced at it. As long as these students don't cause any fatalities, they can do whatever they want. Anyway, they are just a bunch of Heisei wastes who eat and wait to die. As the noon break time was getting closer and closer, the threat in the eyes of the scumbags became more and more obvious, and the eyes of the classmates also became playful. Shut up! Qin Kong's arm was poked, and the next table Kabu-sa quietly handed over a note. Qin Kong opened the note, and Haibusha's handwriting was still very good, with every stroke, and the Chinese characters were not like other students. Ms. Yuno-san, hurry up and run away during the lunch break after class. Looking at the unkind eyes in the class, Qin Kong lowered his head and wrote on the note, "It's useless to run, some things have to be faced sooner or later. Otherwise, I will go to the teacher and let the teacher solve it." Sayaka Kaibi didn't blame her comrade in arms for her reckless behavior, but thought of a remedy. This is a kind person. Qin Kong understands this kindness, but some people think that kindness is weak and can be bullied. Relax. After returning to an Xin, Qin Kong stared at the knowledge on the blackboard earnestly. Although he had the Hokage system, he still had to learn what he should study. In the unease of Psychabe, the bell for the lunch break finally rang. She originally wanted to leave the classroom quickly, but the front and rear doors were closed with laughter and supported by the class. They all looked at Mizuno Sora with interest, just like watching the Colosseum in ancient Rome. People! You took pictures with your phone again? What a rotten person! Mizuno will be maimed this time. Kabe-sa knew that they were not looking at him, but she still stepped back in fear. In the fear of her moving backwards, Sora Mizuno moved forward step by step, until she was almost close to the classmates who were surrounding her. Mizuno Sora's height is 173. Yu Kanshu www.yuyuganshu.com cannot be considered short in school, but two of those who bullied him were over 1.8 meters tall. Bastard, if you give me a seat now, I'll be spared a beating. What is Hong Chuan talking about? Just beat him and kneel on the ground. Yet. Sora Mizuno nodded seriously, agreeing with what the other person said, just beat you guys down to your knees. What? Mizuno made a move. He hit the most burly Hong Chuan with his elbow, and then bowed his waist, pinched the big face with his left hand, and slammed his knee hard like an arrow. Boom! Everyone could hear the dull thumping sound. Hong Chuan! Asshole! Others gathered around, fists, soles of shoes, and even people raised the bench. Seeing this dangerous scene, Sora Mizuno stepped forward instead of retreating. After shouting, he clenched his hands into fists and entangled the opposite side. He used chakra to gather his not too much chakra into his fists and legs. With the powerful bonus of Gang Fist, Sora Mizuno's fist burst out with eye-popping power. The person who was hit either fell to the ground or was thrown out. The fat man holding the bench was even swept away by one leg. Mi Yuan smashed into the crowd watching the play. The stomach, shoulders, back, these places that would not cause fatal injuries were all targeted by Mizuno Sora. In less than half a minute, there were more groaning defeated soldiers on the ground. Kaibu. Sora Mizuno retreated to the side of Kabuta, grabbed her hand, and said, "Let's go." Seeing Mizuno Sora and Kaibu sa running over, the classmates who were blocking the door let out a hellish scream. This guy Mizuno is obviously abnormal today, don't let him catch him and beat him up. Sitting on the steps of the rooftop, Sora Mizuno felt extremely comfortable, and the fit between soul and body deepened. Different from the animation, in reality, in order to prevent students from jumping off the building in high schools in the island country, the roof entrances of most of the school buildings have already been locked. Kabuki was sitting on the steps on the top of the building. Looking at the ceiling of the building, Mizuno Sora laughed. It wasn't him who was laughing, it was the original owner of this body who was laughing freely after letting out a bad breath. Mizuno. Mizuno-san. Seeing Mizuno Sora who was laughing wildly, Kabe Saya timidly wanted to withdraw her hand. From the time she ran out of the classroom to the present, her hand was still held by Sora Mizuno. "Ah, sorry, I'm so happy, I'm a little carried away." Mizuno Sora used the other hand to stand in front of his face, unable to put his hands together, bowed his head and apologized. "No. It's not like that, yes. Sima Kaibi muttered for a long time, but didn't have the courage to say something to let him loose his hand. Kabuta is sitting at the top of the stairs, and Mizuno is sitting on the penultimate step. The height difference between the two sides is a little bit, and Kabaya is a little lower than Mizuno, who is 1.73 meters. This height difference makes Mizuno Sora saw the other's face for the first time, no longer covered by the thick curtain-like bangs. Actually, unexpectedly, it looks very good. In normal times, Haibusha walks with her head down and bent over. With thick and long bangs, the whole person has a gloomy temperament and facial mosaic. "Kaibi, aren't you pretty cute, why are you covering your face?" "Ah." Kaibi Saya didn't expect Sora Mizuno to suddenly say these words, she lowered her head in a panic, but found that she was closer to Sora Mizuno, and the tip of her nose almost touched Sora Mizuno's forehead. Now her face turned red all of a sudden, with a slight pink in her fair skin, she was pretty and lovely. No. Me. Sai Kabe hesitated for a long time, covering her face with her hands. "I'm not cute, compared to everyone. That's because they don't have eyes." Sora Mizuno looked at Sai Kabaya seriously, and Kabaya, who was holding one hand, could only cover one eye with one hand. In their eyes before, they thought I was easy to bully, now what? "I promise, the class can't find anyone more beautiful than you. Kaebi Saya couldn't bear the shyness in her heart anymore, she said softly, hand, hand, hand. Oh, I'm sorry. Mizuno Sora followed Kabe-sa's gaze, and instantly released his hand. He forgot that he was holding the palm of Saikai's hand. The hand feels pretty good, meaty, and tender. Mitsuno-san. I heard that Hong Chuan. Hong Chuan also knows a lot of people. Kaebe-sa accidentally heard a girl talk about Hong Chuan in the toilet, saying that the other party knew a lot of bad people in school, and most of the family members were on the street. The green-skinned gangster is very powerful around the school, and even has some contamination with the extreme way. The soldiers come to block the water and cover the soil. Mizuno Sora rubbed his stomach. By the way, are you hungry? Do not. I'm hungry, let's go and eat. After leaving the stairs, Sayakaibi returned to her cowardly look of bowing her head and stooping down, but Sora Mizuno walked in the corridor like a ghost, and the classmates who had seen the scene just now stepped aside. Some people who had bullied Sora Mizuno simply lowered their heads, or turned around and looked out the window, as if no one passed by. Although she was no longer held by Sora Mizuno, Sayakaibi was still obedient and followed behind, like a little daughter-in-law. Although the taste is not good, Mizuno Sora is not a picky person. After eating 4 bowls of rice in a row, he finished his work satisfied. The fight just now didn't consume much of his chakra. It was because he was not full in the morning. If he let go of the chakra to cast his fist, the school would have been blocked due to the murder. Mitsuno-san. There is also a piece of bread here. Saikabu pushed her bread over. I can't eat it. That's so embarrassing. Saying embarrassed, Mizuno Sora honestly brought the bread. Looking at Sora Mizuno who was chewing heavily, Sayakaibi's mind was spinning. It was the first time she saw Sora Mizuno. Although she didn't have much contact with each other, he seemed to be a different person now. It's not a simple personality change, but a change in small movements and tone. Her left foot touched her right foot, and she grabbed the school uniform skirt with both hands, thinking about why. After lunch, Sora Mizuno walked into the classroom as usual, followed closely by Sae Kaibi. The fragments of the vase in the corner of the classroom have been swept away by the students on duty. The people who were beaten with bruised noses and swollen faces just stared at Mizuno Sora, but no one was looking for trouble without their eyes. At least these people in the class have already started. It is proved that he is courting death, and if he wants to do it, he must gather other people outside the school. Seeing Sayakaibi following behind Sora Mizuno, it was the girls in the class who were chatting in a low voice. Compared with the circle of friends of boys, the circle of friends for girls is smaller and more exclusive. Besides, the boys in this school have not fallen to the level of hitting girls in front of everyone. Mitsuno-san's seed explosion this morning is really scary. Have you seen that you? Oh Mib, she's been with Mizuno all day. Is it possible that these two have something to do with each other? Maybe, the two of them used to be. Maybe they hugged each other to keep warm, and then they could be together. Looking at it this way, Mizuno-san is also very manly and handsome. Several girls said that love did not avoid the two of Mizuno Sora. Reading www.yuyuganshu.com just lowered its voice, but it didn't mean that others couldn't hear them, so their conversations were heard by Kaibi-sa and Mizuno Sora. After these rumors swirled around in his head, they turned into a blush and climbed up Saibi's face. As for Mizuno at the next table, Saikabe is the most familiar in the class. As the poor fellow bullied, although the two usually don't talk much and walk in the class with their heads bowed, they will inevitably come into contact with each other. Kaibi Saya didn't look down on Mizuno who had been bullied all the time. She even felt that someone was bullied like herself, and felt the joy of sharing the same illness in her heart, but the shame and inferiority in her heart prevented her from speaking to Mizuno. If you talk to Mizuno and let the rest of the class see it, it might make the bullying worse. But Sora Mizuno's explosive performance in the morning ripped apart Saya's inherent impression in an instant. She stared blankly at Sora Mizuno's neat performance, and was pulled by Sora Mizuno's hand and ran out of the classroom. Just like the princess in the fairy tale who was imprisoned in the castle by the dragon, and was pulled by the warriors to escape. At that moment, complex emotions flooded into her heart, and when Mizuno Sora raised her head and praised her earnestly on the steps, she, who had always been cowardly, couldn't help but have a bold delusion in her heart. Mizuno-kun seems to be a very nice person. And just now on the roof, he said such bold words. The two seem to be. Kaibi, don't worry about the gossip of those people, they are just mice squatting in the corner, slandering others with their words. Sora Mizuno turned two pens with one hand, actually practicing his control over chakra. Ryu. Gossip. The delusion that had just risen in Kabe-sa's heart was shattered. After school in the afternoon, Mizuno Sora was carrying a school bag in the eyes of a group of unidentified eyes, and Kabusaya was still with him like a follower. There is nothing uncomfortable about Mizuno Sora's behavior. Some people's nature is like this. They are like lambs in the flock. They are cowardly and soft, and they will follow the leader unconsciously. Even if there is a cliff in front of them, they will still be silent. Follow the leader, even if you fall into the abyss. In the long-term bullying, Kaibu-sa has no sense of security, like a sheep thrown into the wolves, living in the black terror of bullying all day long. If there is no sudden explosion of Mizuno Sora, this kind of silent endurance will be with her throughout her high school career. When he saw hope, and this hope was by his side, Kabe-saya instinctively followed behind him. Mizuno Sora was also happy to follow Kabusai behind him. If he didn't help Kabusai, the bullying of everyone in the class would focus on her. He was not like the Virgin, but he was not a walking corpse who would sit and watch her being bullied. Mitsuno-san, shouldn't you go over there and get on the train? Kabe asked cautiously, clutching her school bag. Although she is unknown in the class, in fact, she has been paying attention to everyone silently, memorizing everyone's names and preferences, and observing their every move. She doesn't know why she does this. It may be because lonely people are always good at observed. No, walk home to keep fit. Sora Mizuno showed a hearty smile, but in fact it was because walking home in this way would save commuting expenses. The huge appetite forced Sora Mizuno to increase income and reduce expenditure, and it was necessary to change to a part-time job. After deducting the rent from the meager salary of the part-time job in the convenience store, the rest of the money allowed him to eat at most 3 points a day. Going this way, are we two just on the way? Sora Mizuno pointed to the north intersection. Yet. Kabe's voice was as low as a mosquito. No. No. Let's not go together. If they walked home together after school, wouldn't they be just like boyfriend and girlfriend in the eyes of outsiders? It's better not to cause trouble to Mizuno-san. What? No. No. Mizuno Sora took the school bag in Kabe's hand, which was heavier than his own, but it was exactly what he wanted. If there is no weight-bearing device for physical training in Hokage, just use a school bag to make a living. Following Mizuno Sora's side, Kabe-saya's whole body was as red as a prawn fished out of a pot, that is, she kept her head down and couldn't see the blush on her face, otherwise Mizuno Sora could put her face down. Mixed with the red sunset on the horizon. Kabe-sa faltered, her hands and feet were restrained, like a marionette. She bit her lip stubbornly, took a few quick steps in a messy way. Not only did she not relieve herself, but instead became more serious. It's over. What if Mizuno-san sees this embarrassing picture? He will definitely laugh at me. No, it's a joke in his heart, it's nothing to be laughed at by others, but if Mizuno-san makes fun of him, he might as well die on the spot. She gritted her teeth angrily, and simply clenched her school bag with both hands. Although it looked like it was not smooth, she still felt uncoordinated when walking. Every step was too precise, and her muscles were tight. Kabe-san, are you feeling unwell? Hearing Mizuno Sora's words, Kabuki almost lost her balance and fell to the ground. She said in a panic, "No, no." After walking mechanically for more than 10 minutes, the joints of Kabuki's body were a little stiff. I'm home." Kabusaya took a few steps, turned around and bowed to Sora Mizuno. "Thank you, Mizuno-san." "Ah, you're welcome." Sora Mizuno didn't know why the little girl thanked herself. Although it is not clear, but accept it. Taking the school bag, Saike ran forward like a refugee, and waved goodbye before entering a cooking house. Kaibu Restaurant. Sora Mizuno waved his hand and looked up at the sign on the restaurant. Directly using the surname as the signboard, it seems that Heibo's family is in the catering industry. Mizuno Sora took a look and was about to leave, but frowned and stopped. There was a quarrel in the cooking house. Kabusaya, who had just run in, was suddenly thrown out, and the definitely heavy school bag smashed on her head, slamming half of her face to the ground. "Zayasha, Zayasha!" A woman in cooking clothes ran out of the store and half knelt on the ground trying to help Kabusha up. You two stinky bitches, I'm not, are you living a good life, are you looking for a different man every night, the mother and daughter are together." A drunk man staggered with a bottle of wine came out of the cooking house. "Damn, drive me out, and swallow my money." Before he finished speaking, he threw the wine bottle in his hand at the mother and daughter. But because he was so drunk, Yu read www.yuyugonshu.com, so he didn't have a head at all. The wine bottle rubbed the two of them and hit the ground, and the splattered glass smashed on the mother and daughter. "What?" The drunk man walked forward scoldingly and kicked the woman. Although he didn't kick Kaibsa, he screamed in horror. He was bullied so many times in school, and Kaibusa never. She was so frightened that she screamed, and at most she just sobbed silently. "Damn it, I'll beat you to death." The drunk man raised his palm and was about to slap Kabusha, "And you little bitch." Kabusaya covered her head with her arms and closed her eyes resignedly. "It's not the first time I've been beaten by this man, I just have to endure it and I'll pass, and it's not the first time my neighbors have seen it, but I hope Mizuno-san walks a little further and doesn't see her embarrassed appearance. Kabuki's hopes are doomed." "It's okay." Mizuno Sora rushed over at some point, grabbing the drunk man's raised arm with his hand. Kaibusaya didn't know if it was an illusion. She saw the tenderness in Sora Mizuno's eyes, the tenderness she had only seen in her mother. "Who are you, bastard? Damn it!" The drunkard didn't expect that there would be someone who didn't have eyes to stop him. He shook his arms and looked at Mizuno Sora with turbid eyes, "Dressed like that little bitch. School uniform, okay, that little bitch's concubine. How did I give birth to such a bastard?" The drunk man looked at the mother and daughter on the ground. "Just like her mother, she's a slut." After he finished speaking, he even spit a saliva. Hearing his insults one after another, Mizuno Sora couldn't help but want to make a move. Seeing that he was about to spit, he slapped him in the face, and the saliva and phlegm that had not been spit were slapped back into his stomach. As early as when there was a quarrel in the store, the street was already surrounded by people watching the show, and the Kaibu restaurant would have this show every once in a while. Sora Mizuno's slap was not low. With a small amount of chakra added in anger, the drunk man was slapped and flew up, and the smell of alcohol and a few teeth were also thrown into the sky. Mizuno Sora let go of the drunk man's hand, and in the dumbfounded eyes of the onlookers, the drunk man weighing more than 170 pounds smashed into the trash can on the side of the road. What a force it was! The onlookers couldn't help covering their faces, secretly feeling pain. After coughing a few times on the ground, the drunk man staggered to his feet, touched his bleeding mouth, and raised his fist in anger. Half of the drunk man's face was swollen with a slap, the blood dripping from his nose and mouth wiped his face, and with the missing teeth that leaked air, he seemed to have no second thoughts other than misery. Sora Mizuno would not have pity for such a human being. Another flying kick, before the drunk man could stand firm, he was kicked to the ground by Mizuno Sora, rolling around like a gourd one after another. Saikabe got up from the ground anxiously, hugging Sora Mizuno's leg like a little koala. "No, don't fight again, Mizuno-san, don't cause trouble because of me." Mizuno Sora was not ready to continue fighting. From his words, he could tell that the drunken man might be Kaibe-sa's father. No matter what, he didn't fight against his classmate's father. Although the other party was a scum, who would knowing what the Kaibe family thinks of this drunkard, the superiors rushed forward and did bad things with good intentions, and the lesson that was hated by others, Mizuno Sora also did it in his life. Sora Mizuno squatted down and helped Saikabe and her mother to stand up. "Relax, I know, as long as he doesn't come to beat you, I won't do it." Kaibe-saya is not afraid of what her father will do, but she is afraid that Sora Mizuno will make a big mistake. If he doesn't make a big mistake, and maybe he will be expelled from school. The drunk man lay on the ground for a few seconds, and his dizzy head was able to recover. He was beaten twice by the gust of wind, and his alcohol smell dissipated a little. Later, and only dared to be a hero in front of his former wife and daughter, Se and said that such a person is. He pouted and stood up with difficulty holding the trash can. Seeing Sora Mizuno who was guarding in front of the mother and daughter, he took a few steps back in fear. Those slaps and kicks awakened his cowardly nature. His lips were trembling, and the swearing words reached his throat and swallowed them back. This feeling of not daring to scold made his pain even more. When he saw Mizuno Sora wanting to move forward, his legs were shaking and he swallowed hard. He said viciously, "Stinky bitch, don't forget to call me the money." This sentence was said to Kaibe-saya's mother. After speaking, the drunk man glared at Kaibe-saya and ran away embarrassedly, clutching his stomach. Kabu-saya was standing beside her mother. What happened just now made her figure seem smaller and her waist was more bent. The most painful thing for a person is to expose the scar, and then open the scar in front of everyone to let the pus and evil water flow out. That man is the scar of Saikabu, the shadow that haunted her since childhood. She had been beaten so many times in front of everyone, she thought she would no longer care about the scar being picked open, but why did she feel so uncomfortable in front of Mizuno-san? He couldn't even breathe, and his throat seemed to be choked by an invisible hand. She picked up the school bag on the ground tremblingly, her hands turning white from the straps. She didn't dare to look at Mizuno-san at all, she didn't even dare to stare at the toe of his shoes, she only felt that she had become a tiny ant, and the last trace of her dignity was ripped off by her nominal father in front of Mizuno-san. Sora Mizuno didn't know what to say. He could understand the embarrassment. No one wanted to expose their wounds in front of acquaintances. Kaibe's mother endured the pain of being beaten, and a weak smile appeared on her face. "Zayasha, let's go home. This classmate, come in and sit if you don't mind." Even though she just went through something like that, Kaibe's mother could still face it with a smile. This kind of strength and calmness, Mizuno Sora thought she couldn't do it. After repeatedly resigning, the three walked into the second floor of the cooking house, the living room where the mother and daughter lived, under the onlookers of the surrounding neighbors. "Please wait a moment, I'll go get the medicine box." Kaibe-sa was sitting on the ground like that, with her hands clenched into small fists on her knees, her head lowered, her thick bangs almost covering her entire face. He was not afraid to ask Sora Mizuno to fight, but how to comfort others was a tough job. He considered it for a while, and said softly, "Does it still hurt?" Kabusha whispered in a mosquito-like voice, "No, it doesn't hurt anymore, I can bear it." Both of them have such a father. Mizuno Sora thought that this body also ran away from home because of his alcoholic father, but the difference was that Kabuki also had a mother who depended on each other. "Mom. Mom is not what he said. Mizuno. Mizuno-san, don't get me wrong." Kaibe-saya used a lot of strength to restrain herself from crying in front of Mizuno-san. Reading www.uuganshu.com. He is. "I know, he's a bastard. Sora Mizuno felt that it was strange to say that the other's father was in front of his classmates, because I also have such a father. Ugh. Sora Mizuno briefly described what happened to him, from his father's unemployment and drinking, to his mother's departure, to his own running away from home and now living in isolation. His tone was very flat, as if he was telling a hearsay story, but Kaebi-saya, who had shared experience, felt a shudder. Kaebi-saya didn't expect the two of them to have the same misfortune, and Mizuno-san, who was already alone, even more so. Pitfall. All misfortunes will pass. No one will stay in the past or present forever. Kai beckon, if he is again, you can tell me, don't forget that we are comrades in arms. Kaibusa's nose was sour, and she couldn't help but sobbed softly. Drops of tears flowed from the eye sockets, dripped on the backs of the hands, and dripped on the knees. Are you told to cry by yourself? Mizuno Sora was a little flustered for a while, and he didn't know what to do. He raised and lowered his hand, and finally pressed it on Kaibi's shoulder to activate medical ninjutsu. It must have been painful when I was thrown out of the store. It's all right, it's all right, it's all over. Sora Mizuno continued to release chakra. Kabusaya only felt that the place where Mizuno was touching was so warm, and even the pain felt a lot less. She responded in a low voice, her heart that should have been throbbing thumping, and her body was a little skewed when she relaxed. Zayasha, I've brought the medicine box. Kaibi's mother pushed open the door, holding the prepared medicine box in her hand, and was surprised to see her daughter leaning halfway in front of her classmates. Kaibi-Sara was sitting beside her on pins and needles, with her mother and Mizuno-san on both sides. When she thought that she had almost leaned on Mizuno-san just now, and was bumped into by her mother, she felt ashamed that she wanted to hit her head to death. Kaibi's mother was sitting on the ground, with her hands on the floor in front of her, and bowed slightly. I'm really sorry, what happened just now involved you. You weren't hurt, right? In the face of such formal etiquette, Mizuno Sora also returned the salute. Ms. Kaibi, you are too polite, I'm fine. In the situation just now, I think people with a little sense of justice will come forward to help, and I am Miss Kaibu. My classmates, you can't sit back and watch that kind of thing happen. It's really rude. I haven't introduced myself yet, and I'm called Mizuno Sora, and I'm the next table to Kaibi classmates. Mizuno Sora originally wanted to be called Mrs. Kaibi, but after thinking about the complicated situation of the family, she changed her name to Ms. Kaibi. I'm Arina Kaibi, the mother of Saya Kaibi, and also the shopkeeper of this cooking house. It's great that Zayasha has a classmate like you. Mizuno-kun can just call me Aunt Arina. If possible, I can. Would you like to stay for dinner? Let's do our best to thank you. If Mizuno-kun hadn't held the hand righteously, she would have to take a few days off to recover from her injuries. Ask for leave to recuperate? Mizuno Sora remembered that his next table would take a few days off from time to time. He thought that he was simply bullied by his classmates and had a psychological shadow and needed to recuperate. He didn't expect that there was such a hidden secret. It was too light just now. Considering that the drunk might fight back to find trouble again, Sora Mizuno thought about it and apologized. That's really annoying. Seeing the medicine box by Arina Kaibi, Mizuno Sora left the room with a sense of color, and gave the mother and daughter room to apply medicine. Sitting in the stairwell on the first and second floors, Mizuno Sora found that his proficiency in Gangchuan had reached the level of LV2. Although he could still only perform Clevel Taijutsu, his physical fitness had risen by another level. I don't know what the upper limit of the skill is, but it won't turn into a humanoid Gundam in the end. But at this moment, he regretted that his physical fitness had strengthened. With his sensitive ears, he could hear the rubbing of clothes on the second floor and the whispered painful moans very clearly. Sora Mizuno didn't even hear it, and went to the first floor to arrange the tables and chairs that were messed up because of the fighting. After a long time, the door to the second floor was opened. Arina Kaibi, who had changed clothes, smiled at Sora Mizuno, and went to the backstage on the first floor to prepare the ingredients. Is there anything I can help? Habi Arena shook her head. Mizuno Sora had seen the face under the bangs of Habi's bangs, it was very charming and lovely, and Arena looked 80% similar. Arena seemed to be 20 years old, the latter said, it's all the dishes that have been washed. It was originally the ingredients for the opening tonight, but when something like that happened, it's temporarily closed tonight. Staying on the first floor and there was nothing to help, Mizuno Sora was really uncomfortable, so he just interrupted and pushed open the door on the second floor. Shhhh. On the balcony, Sai Kabu was sitting on a small stool, and there was a water basin in front of her. In the basin were her mother and her clothes. The man just hit the ground, and the clothes were wrinkled and covered with dust and dirt. Hearing the sound of the door being pushed open, Kaibi Saya turned her head weakly, and lowered her head like lightning, seemingly concentrating on washing her clothes. Can I dry it tonight? I have to go to school tomorrow. Yes. Yes, as long as you iron it and let it dry. The next day you can dry it. Kaibu Sa was wearing another casual clothes. Mizuno Sora found that Kaibi Sarah, who was doing housework, was different from usual. When she kneaded and washed the clothes, she was concentrated and single-minded, like she was seriously polishing a gem. Because the two sides were facing each other, Mizuno Sora could see Kaibi Sa's side face. With thin lips, a slender and straight nose, and a narrow chin, this is a delicate face that can kill all the girls in the class without makeup. Mizuno. Mizuno-san. Kabu Saya's soft cry brought Mizuno Sora's thoughts back to reality. Your coat is dirty, take it off. Let's wash it together. Kaibu Saya still looked at the water basin, she dared not look directly at Mizuno Sora, it was me, leaning on you to get dirty. Don't bother, myself. Seeing that Kaibi Sa's eyes were a little rosy and about to cry again, Mizuno Sora changed his mind and took off his jacket. I'll trouble you, I'm so sorry. She lowered her head and took the coat. After soaking in the basin for a while, Kabusha carefully rubbed and washed it. Compared with other clothes, she washed this dress more carefully, and she refused to let go of every corner of the cuffs, but also softer. Does he do this often? Yet. Kaibi Saya's heart trembled slightly, since she had lost all her dignity in front of Ms. Yunosan, she didn't care about anything else, and Ms. Yunosan even happened to her. She told her all about her tragic situation. After he divorced his mother, he took away all the family's property, and also took up his grandfather's pension. After his grandfather's death, this house left to his mother, he will also take it. Otherwise, give him all the money he earns every month. This is indeed an out-and-out bastard. Mizuno Sora felt that he was playing too lightly. Generally, women can get half of the family property after divorce. This doesn't know what means he used to grab all the family property. Mitsuno-san. You don't need to shoot, he'll be gone after a dozen hits. If you let him get entangled, you won't be able to survive in school. The methods of rogues. Sora Mizuno has been in contact with all kinds of rogues in his life, and he also understands their methods. If he dares to come, I'll beat him again, once again. You must not back down from this kind of person, otherwise it will fuel his arrogance. Sai Kaibi nodded with a vague understanding. She felt that everything that happened today was too dreamy. First, in school, Mizuno beat the classmates who had bullied them, and this afternoon drove her terrifying nightmare. Simply, just like those princes in fairy tales. Kaibu Sa couldn't help thinking about herself again, a coward who likes to cry at every turn, bows her head and bends like a monkey when she walks, wears rustic and old-fashioned clothes, doesn't know how to dress up, speaks stutteringly, still in Mizuno classmates was beaten like that in front of me. In contrast, the two are like a complete ugly duckling. Mizuno Sora is very strange. Why is Kaibi saying crying again? He remembers that he didn't say anything. The meal is ready, let's come down to eat. The evening meal of the Kaibu family is a very simple Japanese family meal, but Irina made a sense of ritual: rice, miso soup, a few small fish, pickled vegetables, fried eggs, fried pork chops, all kinds of meat. In Sora Mizuno's eyes, it was already a very hearty dinner. In my memory, family dinner was rice, stir-fried vegetables, and miso soup. After my parents divorced, dinner was even more unbearable. I often have to buy discounted bento at the convenience store when I get off work. If I don't eat it that night, it will spoil the next day. Is it true that she is a woman who can open a restaurant? Irina Kaibi's cooking skills are much better than those of convenience store bentos, and she has a good grasp of heat and seasoning. In contrast, it seems to be insulting Aunt Juelina's craftsmanship. Controlling his appetite and not eating too much, Sora Mizuno learned from the other two to chew slowly. How does it taste? Is there anything I'm not satisfied with? Irina's face was no longer visible from the shadow of the beating, and she smiled as if nothing had happened. It's delicious, it tastes great, I can't pick out a problem. Sora Mizuno added, I've never had such a delicious dinner. If it's delicious, eat more, and there's nothing to welcome at home, so Mizuno-kun doesn't dislike it. Irina then put another bowl of rice on Mizuno Sora. In terms of cooking level, Ziosa is not as good as any other. How inferior to me, if I get married in the future, her craftsmanship. Mom. Saikabe said weakly. I must have been misunderstood by my mother when I went home with Mizuno-kun in the afternoon. How could Mizuno-kun like someone like me? Mizuno Sora took a bite of the dish with an expression he didn't understand, and said cheerfully, yeah, it's delicious. How is the relationship between Mizuno-kun and Zayasha in school? Irina asked nonchalantly. It's just ordinary classmates. Kaibu Shajui still had food in his mouth, but he still anxiously replied, let's get out of school together today, and it's also a coincidence. Mizuno Sora was eating silently. Mizuno-kun, Kaibi is too introverted and easy to suffer. Can you please help her at school? Hearing that the topic was pointed at him, Sora Mizuno also put down his job. Yes, Aunt Irina, it's alright to say that Kaibi classmates don't think it's too troublesome for me. How could it be, isn't it, Zayasha? No, I won't dislike it. Kaibu sa lowered her head to eat, her face turning even redder. After a meal, Sora Mizuno ate happily. Irina watched the two of them while eating, and Sakai was sitting on pins and needles counting the grains of rice. After a pause, Sora Mizuno asked Irina, Aunt Irina, I saw a job advertisement posted outside the store. Is it okay for a high school student like me? I have experience working in a convenience store, and I have a little bit of cooking. A little, but the level is definitely not comparable to yours. Irina nodded and said sincerely, you are very welcome. An upright person like Mizuno-kun is the best. Is an hourly salary of 1,200 okay? Manage dinner. It's 1,200 when it's new, and I also take care of dinner. This is rather good. The minimum hourly wage in Tokyo is less than 1,000. The 1,200 hourly wage offered to him is very good, because Mizuno Sora is a high school student and has very few working hours. Under the circumstances, I can only do simple errands, and also manage a dinner. Mizuno Sora also knew that Irina's move was to reciprocate, so she bowed and accepted it embarrassedly. Then can you come to work tomorrow? If you work in advance, you can let Zayasha take you with you. Yes, I can't ask for it. Hearing that Mizuno-san was going to work at his family's cooking restaurant, and he was taking it with him, Kabe's little heart thumped in disappointment. If that's the case, wouldn't I have to leave school with Mizuno-san every afternoon? This will let the people in the class see what they will think. And Mizuno-san would dislike himself for being too stupid. Until Mizuno Sora left the cooking house, Kaibi Saya's head was still buzzing, she walked dizzy, everything that happened today was too magical. Zayasha, Zayasha. Mama's soft calling brought Kabe Saya's thoughts back to reality. What? Mizuno-kun, he is really a very nice person, right? Yes, it is. After running home from the Kaibu restaurant, Sora Mizuno first resigned from his job at the convenience store, and then continued his training in taijutsu and medical ninjutsu. He used the power of chakra in the 2 fights today. When will he be able to solve these small roles with pure physical strength? The next day, he ran to the school full of energy. Before he got to the school gate, Mizuno Sora saw Kaibu-sa now at the entrance of the alley next to the school. Kai-bekan, what's wrong? Kaibu-sa stood at the entrance of the alley and took out a piece of clothing from the bag. This is your coat. I washed it last night and dried it. Yu reading www.yuyugonshu.com. Taking the coat, Sora Mizuno found that the coat was spotlessly washed and ironed in a neat and orderly manner. He also carefully found that the clothes had been sewn in place where the frying line was originally. There is a faint scent on the coat, not only from washing clothes, but also other scents. Is it because of washing and drying with the clothes of the mother and daughter of Kaibu? How long have you been waiting here? Sora Mizuno asked as he put on his coat. No. I didn't wait, I just arrived. Before deceiving people, do the preparations. Sora Mizuno put his hand on Saikai's shoulder and patted it lightly. There are dewdrops on the shoulders. He gently flicked away the dewdrops on the shoulders of the girl's school uniform. What a stupid person this is. Me. And just wait for me to hand it over to me at school, you don't have to stand here stupidly. Feeling the caress on her shoulders, Sayakaibi's nose was a little sour. I'm afraid that other people will say something like that. That kind of thing is bad for Mizuno-san's reputation. Mizuno Sora silently looked at the cautious girl. He knew what Kaibu-sa was worried about. Isn't it because I'm afraid that people in the school will misunderstand the relationship between the two? For fear of being misunderstood, or to protect Mizuno's reputation, she was willing to get up early in the morning and wait by the alley next to the school, carefully watching everyone who passed by, not even noticing the condensation on her body. This is a pitiful person who is humble to the core. Don't be afraid, just sit up straight, go, let's go to school together. After speaking, Mizuno-jun took the school bag in her hand. Don't be so early in the future, just wait in the cooking house, I asked you to go to school together. Following Mizuno Sora into the classroom at school, Kaibu-sa really experienced what it means to be stared at by everyone. Half of the eyes of the class were focused on Mizuno Sora, while the other half were looking at her. As for these scrutiny and playful gazes, Kaibu-sa instantly understood what it meant. Yesterday, Mizuno-kun took her hand, and today they go to school together. Kaibu-sa lowered her head blushing, and silently took out the book. She never believed that a beautiful love story of love at first sight would happen to her, but after planting it yesterday, Kaibu-sa just wanted to be close to Mizuno's side, half cuddling like yesterday afternoon. From Mizuno's body, she felt a sense of security that she had never felt before, the big hand stroking her shoulders, the smell of sunshine on her coat. Falling in love with someone is easy, it only takes one day. She even had an idea that she knew was wrong at this time. The past campus bullying seemed to be a kind of hardship, giving her the opportunity to get close to Mizuno-kun, who was also injured. But how does he feel about me? Kaibu-sa glanced at Mizuno Sora, and immediately withdrew her gaze. Kaibu, don't think blindly, Mizuno-san is just a chivalrous person. He will take action against any injustice. It's not that he has any thoughts on you, so let's give up this naive idea. Not only Kaibu-sa was watching Mizuno Sora, but there were other interested people in the class who were also watching Mizuno Sora, but most of these eyes contained malice. Mizuno Sora doesn't care about the eyes of the villain. Those who have been cleaned up still have malicious intentions, but as he said to Kaibu-sa, soldiers will block water and earth, and he is never afraid of things. Saikabe is really not good at concealing her emotions and small movements. Sora Mizuno keenly observed that the little girl has looked at herself more than once in class. He is not the sluggish male protagonist in Japanese light novels, and he also has a vague sense of Kaibi-sa's affection. But how to respond to this affection, he is not ready yet. The education level of public high schools is vastly different from that of private schools. People with money and power will send their children to private schools instead of public state schools that implement happy education. Under the feeding of happy education, there is no inhuman talent. The children of ordinary families cannot compete with the second generation of private schools. After dealing with a day of teaching, the two walked together. Whether it is elementary school, middle school, or high school, a troublesome place in Japanese schools is that they need to change their shoes when entering and leaving the teaching building. While changing shoes at the shoe cabinet, Mizuno Sora said to Kaibusai, "Kaibu, let me carry your school bag for you." "Why is your school bag so heavy?" Sora Mizuno's school bag was very light, containing only textbooks and homework. But Kaibusha's school bag is not an ordinary weight. Mizuno Kong found that Kaibaya has been bending over. Is it also related to carrying such a heavy school bag all the time? Inside, there are sports clothes, shoes. Kaibi-sae hesitated and didn't say anything, but Sora Mizuno's eyebrows were already raised. It seems that she was not lightly bullied by the school. If these clothes are left in the school, they may be bullied by those bullies. It is common for her to be cut and graffitied. Bullying in island countries is very common. Most of them are mental bullying, but some are substantive bullying. For example, last year's sensational suicide case of a 6th grade girl in Hideo City Primary School, when attending a classmate's birthday party, she put herself she was beautifully dressed, but when she arrived, her classmates pressed their faces into the cake. Everyone laughed and took pictures and forwarded it to Line. When other children saw her crying, they said, "This is all to make everyone happy, even a small cake. It's a joke, you can't accept it, you're so weird, it's a waste of everyone's preparation." The 6th grade girl was also blackmailed by her classmates and forced to pay others to sing and play. The day before she committed suicide, she told her classmates that she wanted to commit suicide, so the classmates posted online to force her suicide message. The follow-up content is that some of the parents of the bully apologized, and some insisted that this was just a play between children and could not be regarded as bullying. "Your daughter committed suicide by jumping off a building and my children have nothing to do with it." Among the most common bullying methods, the one that is most difficult for foreigners to understand is practice suicide. As the name suggests, it is to let the bullied practice how to commit suicide. Because Mizuno Sora's predecessor was often bullied, he was also very concerned about these bullying news, and he could be regarded as an alternative long-term illness and became a good doctor. In addition to jumping off buildings, most of the bullies were hanged, at home, at school, and in front of the graves of relatives, followed by jumping off the track and cutting the wrists. Sora Mizuno opened the school bag, took out the uniform and shoes inside, and put them in Kaibi-sa's cabinet. "Mizuno, don't. Kaibu, no one dares to bully you now." Under the complicated eyes of Saikai, Sora Mizuno stuffed all the useless things into the cabinet. "These, and these, don't need to be brought." Others in the class were also changing their shoes beside the shoe cabinet. The girls who had bullied Saikai trembled when they heard Mizuno's words. Thinking of Mizuno's murderous appearance, did they find an opportunity to apologize to Kaibi? "Okay." In front of so many classmates, Mizuno-kun said that Kaibi-sa's head was about to be buried in her chest, her feet were together, and her breathing became more and more rapid. "Let's go, I'll ask the master to teach you a lot today." The two walked back to the store together. The Kaibu restaurant is very quiet today. When there is no such to make trouble, the Kaibu restaurant has been calm. "You're back? Zayasha, Mizuno-kun." Irina wiped the table and chairs, preparing for the evening. The Kaibu restaurant is open day and night. The difference is that at night, the restaurant's business nature becomes closer to an izakaya, offering sake and some snacks. Space and colleagues complain about the boss's faults and the company's problems. I am back. Excuse me. Irina responded with a smile. Zayasha, take Mizunokan to get acquainted with the work. I have prepared a uniform for men upstairs. After changing into the uniform with the Kaibu restaurant logo on the second floor, Sora Mizuno followed Kaibu SA to the backstage. One's attitude towards life can be seen from the cleanliness of the room. The front desk and backstage of Kaibu restaurant are actually connected. Diners can safely see how the chef cooks food, but it looks more intuitive in the backstage. The stoves and kitchen utensils are very clean. They are not contaminated with oil like a small izakaya. Sora Mizuno also observed that there is no dirt even in the corners that are difficult to clean. The mother and daughter are very meticulous in cleaning and scrubbing every day. Mitsunokan, do you know how to wash and pick vegetables? Kaibu SA took out a basin with fresh vegetables bought today. Wash the leaves, and then take out the damaged and inedible ones. Saikabe stopped stammering when she talked about what she was good at. This trivial matter is fine. Sora Mizuno washed his hands with dish soap, and took the basin of Saikabe. The cooking house provides some simple side dishes in the evening. The wine is ready-made, and some need to be warmed. I will make the side dishes and cold dishes. Those more difficult dishes are all from my mother. Let's make it. Kaibsa looked at Mizunokan cautiously after finishing speaking, and she seemed to have accidentally said too much, so that Mizunokan would not have a misunderstanding of bossy. Mizuno Sora was picking vegetables, but she was a little embarrassed. The mother and daughter did the warm wine, cold dishes, and hot dishes. She was responsible for the simple work of washing vegetables and rice, and she deserved the money. Well, I probably know. Mizuno Sora said with a smile to Kaibi SA, I will start by washing vegetables. Master, please teach me how to cook as soon as possible so that I can help you. Saying what the master said, Saikabe felt embarrassed. In Japan, the off-duty time of social animals is concentrated at the peak of 5.6:00. If you have to work overtime, it will be counted separately. At 6 o'clock, there are gradually more customers in the restaurant, and most of them are office workers in suits and leather shoes. Come. After probably washing the dishes for tonight, Mizuno Sora wiped his hands. Irina was in charge of the cooking, while Kabuki Saya brought the plate to the guests' table, and immediately cut meat and vegetables on the chopping board. Seeing how the two of them were getting busy, Sora Mizuno also took out the knife after observing the movements of Saikabe for a while. Kaibekan, let me cut the vegetables for you. Ah, still not. Don't worry, I've observed it for a long time, and it won't be too ugly. In restaurants, cutting vegetables is actually a skill. If the cut vegetables are too ugly, the appearance will be much worse when they are placed on a plate. I did not mean that. After Sora Mizuno cut a few vegetables on the chopping board, he suddenly stopped. He looked at the chopping board strangely, and at the line of words that appeared in his eyes. Sword Art, LV1. In the Naruto world, most ninjas practice ninjutsu and illusion, or taijutsu. However, very few people practice swordsmanship, and most of the blades are kunao. However, this does not mean that there are no masters in the world of Naruto who are famous for their swordsmanship. The prominent representative is the Kingdom of Iron, a country established by samurai who mastered swordsmanship. Unlike the ninja village, which is composed of various ninjas, the Iron Country is a country ruled by samurai warriors, a neutral country with independent culture, independent authority, and independent combat power. They do not rely on various ninjutsu and bloody-based boundaries, but rely on swordsmanship in their hands to fight with ninjas, which is a wonderful neutral force in the Naruto world. The swordsmanship of the Iron Country can also be said to be unique in the Naruto world. Mifune once defeated the demigods and Hanzo with his extreme swordsmanship. In terms of combat effectiveness, he can become a hero by practicing swordsmanship to the extreme. After learning the sword for no apparent reason, Sora Mizuno's speed with the sword suddenly increased, which startled Saikai, who had been watching. It was obviously just a kitchen knife, but with the blessing of swordsmanship, it felt like Mizuno Sora used a murder weapon. A cabbage flew up and down and quickly peeled it off. The thawed pork and beef were actually very difficult to cut, but no matter how difficult it was, the fat is still the fascia, and in the light of the knife, there is no obstruction like tissue paper. It is pleasing to the eye. Kaibu Saya can only describe Mizunokan's knife skills in this way. It is clearly a simple job in the kitchen, but he can see the feeling of artistic performance. It's amazing, Mizuno. Have you ever learned professional swordsmanship? Saikabe gathered up her courage and didn't add her classmates after her surname. It's as good as a chef in a big restaurant. I sometimes cook my own meals at home. Sora Mizuno kept cutting vegetables and meat, but I can't be a professional or something, as long as I can help Aunt Irina and you. Could it be that the chefs in the big hotel all master the swordsmanship of murder? Physical skills can be upgraded from level 1 to level 2, and swordsmanship is naturally also possible. Sora Mizuno carefully cuts vegetables and meat with the enthusiasm of brushing experience. He has a little understanding of the skills of the Hokage system. In addition to the 3 skills given at the beginning, the swordsmanship was unlocked because he touched the knife, and after using it, the swordsmanship skill was naturally triggered. In Japan, swords are not separated. Does that mean that swimming in the swimming pool can trigger the water escape, and being blown for half a day in the wind tunnel can trigger the wind escape? Mizuno Sora's speed of cutting vegetables and meat is very fast, and the finished product is much better in appearance than Kaibi's. Kazuya has been helping her mother since she was in junior high school. As Irina said, she is not inferior to her in cooking, but seeing Sora Mizuno's rapid progress, Kazuya doesn't feel any jealousy. Mizunokan is Mizuno. No matter what, she is so powerful. She is sincerely happy for Mizuno. And even when it was boring to cut vegetables, Mizunokan had a smile on his face, no impatient expression, what a kind mood. But in comparison, she, who was used to being humble, couldn't help but feel hurt. With Sora Mizuno's help, Saikabe was also freed from the work of washing, picking, and cutting. She wore a small apron and cooked side dishes in the background. Roll fresh fish and shrimp in egg flour, then fry in oil until golden brown. A simple but delicious tempura is made. The small Heibo restaurant not only provides appetizers and set meals, but also a good roast bird shop. The meat cut by Mizuno Sora is strung on an iron rod, and then the Heibo yarn is placed on the fire with seasonings and grilled, tempting. The scent of people spread throughout the store. The customer at table number 4 wants 5 cheese chicken kebabs. Add 2 more bottles of sake to number 5 Zhou's guests. The new guests at table 9 want pork chop rice, teriyaki chicken leg rice, cold cuts, 1 for each, and 2 cans of beer. Kaibu's restaurant entered a busy time, wearing an apron, while delivering meals, while greeting guests at the door, while preparing cold dishes. She was completely free from the fear of school at this time in the store. As a chef, Irina has no time to spare. She needs to talk with guests while cooking. The chef is the face of the cooking house, especially in a small cooking house where the front desk and the backstage are connected. The chef needs to keep interacting with the guests. I brought you 2 cans of beer and 2 bottles of sake. Is the brand correct? Mizuno Sora was a little distressed when he looked at Saikabe, who was busy and kept busy, and did his best to prepare things in the background. I also have cold dishes. It's set up. Busy in the front and back office non-stop, Saikabe said to Sora Mizuno, "Thank you Mizuno." "You're welcome." Mizuno smiled and continued to bury his head in cutting meat and vegetables. "I can't take my wages for nothing." The busy time of Kaibu restaurant is from 6 o'clock to 9 o'clock. After this, it does not mean that it cannot make money. Some companies that often work overtime will leave work until midnight, and some izakayas are open until late at night. But on the one hand, Saikabe has to go to class tomorrow. On the other hand, Adachi Ward is a suburb of Tokyo. There are no enterprises and companies, and it is a quiet residential area. If you wait any longer, there may not be many office workers. Reading www. Most of the office workers at UUGonshu.com choose to solve the problem of having dinner at an izakaya near the company. If it is opened in a bustling commercial area, after 9 o'clock is the busiest time. Besides, the security in Adachi City at night is not very good. If you walk drunk in the middle of the night, you need to worry about personal safety. After sending off the last wave of guests, Irina wiped the sweat from her forehead. Kaebi-saya sat weakly on the chair and rubbed her legs. Only Mizuno Sora was still energetic, and she had been cooking all night, and her swordsmanship had been improved to a high level. LV2 skills require less experience in the early stage, so they can be upgraded quickly. Compared with LV1, LV2's swordsmanship is not as great as the earth-shaking gap. It just deepens the instinct of using swords in the mind. Mizuno-kun, how are you? Are you still adapting to the rhythm of this job? Irina wiped the table and filled 3 drinks. It's very busy, but Aunt Irina is no problem. I'm just fighting from the side, but you and K-Bezin have worked hard. Mizuno-san's sword skills are really powerful, high quality, and fast. We were a lot more relaxed tonight. Irina nodded heartily, and the more she saw Mizuno Sora, the more she liked it. After yesterday's incident, she thought that Mizuno-kun had a tendency to be restless. After all, he looked like he was often fighting, but looking at Mizuno's serious and hard-working performance today, he was not anxious when busy, and was impatient with mechanical repetitions. His face is always flat, and his character is gentle and refined. People with such a calm personality, young people or social people, are rare, and they are rare good people. But to be cautious, let's observe more carefully. After the busy work, Mizuno Sora and Kaebi-Sara cleaned the kitchen waste together, while Irina cooked the last working meal of the night. After Mimi had a meal, Irina also packed a meal for Sora Mizuno. It was breakfast for tomorrow morning. She had already heard about Sora Mizuno's family situation. It's all she can to help without touching the young man's self-esteem. Carrying tomorrow's breakfast that Irina had packed for him, Sora Mizuno ran all the way home and it was almost 10:30. Adachi Ward was not the bustling center of Tokyo that was brightly lit all night. Every household had closed the doors and turned off the light bulbs. Mizuno Sora, who is daring and has ninjutsu by his side, is not afraid of a few green-skinned gangsters, a specialty of Adachi, suddenly rushing out of the corner. During this run, Sora Mizuno didn't use medical ninjutsu to cheat. He held his knees and took a breath. Sora Mizuno climbed up the 3rd floor with a thud, but he stopped at the entrance of the stairs. It wasn't that he didn't want to go, it was the front someone. I saw a woman and a monk. He was indeed a monk, with a bald head and a monk's clothes, and the woman next to him, Sora Mizuno, also knew her, the neighbor Mrs. Sada. A woman who has been keeping her eyebrows low and pleasing to the eye, looks pretty good, but her body is very thin, and it is described as haggard, which destroys the overall beauty. No matter who she encounters, she bows her head and smiles, not much to say, her body has a strong gloomy temperament. Different from the humbleness of Saikabe, Mrs. Sada's gloom is from the inside out, and it is also mixed with unspeakable despair. The 2 residents did not say a few words, and they nodded when they met. Mizuno Sora's understanding of Mrs. Sada only single, with a daughter in high school. The family situation is also very miserable. Then again, he lives in Adachi Ward, and he rents the most cramped rental house, and there are a few other tragic stories that he doesn't have of his own. Leading a monk home, and it's still 10:30 in the evening. Japanese monks' ban on carnivorous wives and storage has been lifted as early as the Meiji period, which means that monks can eat meat and marry wives. Regarding the matter between Mrs. Sada and the monk, Sora Mizuno has no position to say anything. Single women are willing, and monks are not breaking the law. It's not his turn to object to what you like and what I want. Sora Mizuno waited at the corner, until two people walked into the room and the door closed with a bang before he came out of the corner. He was walking with a packing box in hand, and there was a slight rustling sound in the corridor. Judging by the sound, it was another staircase in the corridor. A figure was sitting on the small bench, and she also heard the voice and looked at Sora Mizuno. "It is Mrs. Sada's daughter, Sada Mai." Sora Mizuno stopped awkwardly. "This is really embarrassing." The daughter's mother just walked into the house with a monk, and she followed her on her heels. To say that she didn't see it would be a complete nonsense. If she knew this, she might as well wait and go upstairs. "It's so late, a little cold." Sora Mizuno didn't know what to say for a while to remedy the embarrassing scene. The current season is early spring, the tail of winter has just passed, and it is still a little cold. "You mean I'll go back to the house when it's cold?" Watching that woman get dirty with the bald head. Sada Mai's words were like taking gunpowder. Mizuno Sora wanted to complain, but considering that such a thing was encountered, no one felt comfortable. Thinking in a different position, if he is Sada Mai, the emotions will be even more intense. "If it's cold, you can come and sit in my room for a while." "Need not." Sada Mai has absolutely no superficial skills from the Icelanders, and her mouth is full of impatience and coldness. "Then I'll go in. If it's cold, you can knock on the door. My room will be warmer." Finally, with a polite voice, Mizuno Sora opened the door, took off his shoes, and put the packaged meals on the table. Taking off his clothes and resting his feet on the edge of the bed, Sora Mizuno slowly started doing push-ups. In order to celebrate the progress of taijutsu and swordsmanship, let's add 100 more push-ups today than yesterday. In other words, with medical ninjutsu to relieve muscle soreness, Sora Mizuno was able to complete this inhuman push-up exercise, but with such blessings, Sora Mizuno had to stop after doing hundreds of them. It's not that the body can't hold on, but the sound insulation of the rental house is too poor, and Mrs. Sada's voice is completely opposite to the usual slow and soft words. The sound is unbearable. He couldn't take it anymore. He couldn't sleep in bed after taking a shower, so he put on his clothes and moved a small bench to the corridor. Sada Mai was still sitting there, looking at the city outside the window. Only a few households were still lit up, like a dark world of death. She glanced at Sora Mizuno, who came out carrying the bench, but did not speak. Sora Mizuno smiled and sat there with a stool, holding a test paper in his hand. After finishing a math test paper in an uncomfortable mood, Sora Mizuno picked up the test paper and held it in his hand, like holding a sword. There are actually quite a few swordsmanship schools in Hokage, such as Konoha's Konoha-style swordsmanship, his own Konoha-style swordsmanship Liu's Kosuk and Moonlight Blast, who is good at the dance of the three suns and the moon, are the representatives of Konoha's swordsmanship. Not to mention the Iron Country. Compared with LV1, LV2's swordsmanship has not changed dramatically, and Mizuno Sora didn't comprehend those heaven-defying swordsmanship by himself, but some basic skills of the swordsmanship genre in Hokage were engraved in his memory. With every wave of the test paper, those swordsmanship moves are being released. Yu reading www.yuyugonshu.com. Although ninjutsu is popular in Naruto world, swordsmanship is not taken seriously, but swordsmanship is definitely more subtle than Earth. Earth swordsmanship is against enemies who are also human, but the enemies of Naruto swordsmanship are inhuman beings capable of enemy tanks and cannons. But not everyone can appreciate this exquisite swordsmanship. Are you a middle schooler? Sada Mai couldn't bear the sound of the neighbor waving the test paper beside him. Who are you? Which ancient swordsman's direct descendant? The girl next door owes a lot to her, and Mizuno Sora guessed that Sada Mai was either a bully at school, or she was severely excluded by others. I'm, my own swordsmanship, the best in the world. Cut. If it weren't for the inability to return to the house, Sada Mai would have moved on the bench and left. The people who live here are really crazy. The boy next door is usually timid and sleazy, but tonight he let her sit in the house with bad intentions. Is it because you look at that woman and think you are the same person? Sadamai thought with hatred in her heart. She hated this dilapidated small building, the Adachi district, and everything around her. Then, Gu! Sadamai let out a long cry from her resentful stomach. The hunger from her stomach instantly defeated her hatred. She sat there stiffly, the expression on her face solidified. She didn't dare to turn her head or move her eyes. The wretched man next door must be smiling, and he must have a mocking smile on his face. He couldn't turn his head and pretended that nothing happened. Are you hungry? Sadamai turned her head blushing and said angrily, I'm not hungry. I'm not hungry at all. Gu!